Hello, friends. Stephen Manning, S.O.S. Integrity Ireland. Running a day late on this one. My sincere apologies, guys. But frankly, this particular subject material, yeah, it's given me a bad headache, guys. So anyway, I'll try and keep the usual upbeat approach to our talk today. But I want to start off now. You can see the title on the right here. The first casualty of war is truth. Somebody reminded me of this in a post. I want to address today some of the reactions to a couple of posts I put up. Now, I believe I've been pretty lucky so far, even though there has been considerable interference on the so-called, mainstream sort of social media platforms. I haven't actually been banned. I've had a couple of videos pulled here and there. I've never actually been banned. I've always tried to make sure I'm doing my research, and apologies if I don't respond to the comments as we move along, guys, because I've got, again, as usual, quite a tight schedule, and but I believe some really important material to cover today. But I've been fortunate. It seems that there's a lot of respect, really, for the things I have to share. Some of the material I share is absolutely original. I usually do very thorough research before putting up any commentaries. But all I did in the last couple of weeks, I posted 2 comments. We're going to look at them in a moment, or two videos, basically. And we're going to have a brief look at them. And I want to explore the difference between subjectivity and objectivity, in as much as we are evaluating news stories to the best of our ability based on the information that's coming to us. And I'm putting forward the position that if you're evaluating some of these life-altering news stories, like about major conflicts such as the Israeli-Hamas conflict going on at the moment, Ukraine, the developments now with America and Russia and so on and so forth. If you do all this solely from a subjective point of view, it's quite likely that you are actually feeding the problem. Now, I know that might alienate a lot of people at a stroke, but the plain fact of the matter is you cannot think objectively unless you've got a little bit of experience under your belt and you understand basically what the world is all about. Sadly, most people only operate from a subjective point of view, some broader and some less broad. The more narrow your subjective point of view is, the more likely it is that you're falling afoul of deception, misleading stories, and are playing into the hands of the people I call the diabolicals. So with that introduction, if you like, guys, we're going to tackle some of the very contentious subs involved in this strife out in the Middle East, because I came under a certain amount of attack from certain quarters because I put these posts up. Now, the posts, I thought, were helping fuel the objective outlook. I was giving perspectives that were a little bit unpopular, maybe, or a little bit unusual, and asking the question, is there something to hear here? Is there something we should know here? Are we getting the full story? Is there a perspective to this that we may all be overlooking? Because that's my fundamental position, is that the biggest picture is being missed by almost everyone. And the biggest picture is a historical picture that involves an understanding of the meaning of life, an understanding of God's providence, what's going on, whether or not what's going on in the Middle East is a reflection of some aspect of the providence. If so, which parties are playing which roles? Are they succeeding or failing in those roles? And so on and so forth. So, and again, apologies, I can see comments coming up on the right. I can't deal with them right now, folks, but I certainly will at the end of the presentation. So let's go to the first slide. It's sort of instructional. I'll pull this up for you first, guys, so that it's a bit clearer. The first casualty of war is truth. Who profits from the lies? Seeing the bigger picture requires open, intelligent minds. And I don't just mean a capacity for rational thinking. I mean well-informed, sort of wise minds. Okay, so here we go for the first slide. I borrowed this from somewhere. Thank you to the sources where I get some of this work, and then I added left and right my own commentaries. Okay, so putting the work into discerning the truth. It's not easy, guys. You've got to work at it a little bit. But let's just clarify the difference between subjective versus objective. blue box on the left. Subjective information is anything that is based on personal opinion, judgment, feelings, or point of view. For example, to quote another example, you may believe that your spouse is the most beautiful person in the world, right? That's a subjective point of view, and it's true to you, but it may not be objectively true. In other words, if we were to ask 100 people in the street, is this the most beautiful person in the world? They most likely would disagree. So at that's just a very simple example, but it means if you have limited education, and by education I mean education as a word, if you have limited education or limited exposure to certain things, certain themes, then the chances are that your understanding and your opinions will be more objective than they are, sorry, will be more subjective than they are objective. Objective meaning. Objective information is factual and based on observations and measurements. So as you see the two columns on the left and the right, these are sort of opposing concepts. So subjective equates to local, limited, prejudiced, not necessarily in a bad way, but you prejudge based on your limited understanding of things, yeah? Beliefs as opposed to facts and realities, okay? Beliefs. Anyone can believe anything once. As a matter of fact, this is one of the biggest problems we face, especially in conflicts that have a religious aspect to them. A lot of people believe stuff to such a degree, stuff they can't prove, but they believe it to such a degree that they're willing to kill for it, yeah? Assumptions, not knowledge, assumptions, okay? And narrow-mindedness, okay, to a certain extent. Over on the right, we've got opposite to local is global, opposite to limited, comprehensive, unbiased, reality, scientific, and bigger picture thinking. And there at the bottom, as you can see, I've said subjective thinking can be, right? I mean, if you're not exposed to more information, obviously you're stuck in whatever information you've got. But it can be easy, lazy, and emotional, all right? Coming to conclusions, as we're going to see in a few minutes, okay? Versus thoughtful, diligent research, okay? You have to put the effort in. Now, perhaps it's I have to explain here, perhaps I have to take some responsibility for not being clearer when I put this information up. But, you know, often I finish the statement when I put a post up with a question mark, meaning it's open to debate, guys. But I'm putting up information because I think it's helpful. First of all, I'm very concerned about the general trend in Ireland in particular, which appears to be very, let's just use the term loosely, pro-Palestinian and anti-Israeli. Now, I know it's subtle. I know we've got all sorts of nuances in there that need to be explored. We don't have time for all that. I'm making a point here today. And in a nutshell, I suppose I'm saying to some of the more subjective people coming on platforms where I have, where I've put information and attacking me based on your subjective position, especially when you do it in a nasty way. And by the way, I'll give credit to the few people who made critical comments or apparently critical comments or educational comments without being overtly rude or nasty. There was a few of you on there that didn't manage to rein in your impulses. This is a byproduct of excessively subjective thinking and positioning, as we'll see. All right. So I said I'll take some responsibility maybe for not putting the message across as clearly as possible, but there can't be a soul in the world that would summarize the Israeli-Arab conflict and what's going on in Gaza as a simple or easy to understand set of circumstances. It's not, far from it. And I've got a couple of concessions to make here today as well in respect to some of the posts that were made, which I hope will counterbalance any perception that I am some sort of a Nazi Zionist or something of that nature, which has been said, I'm sorry to say. Right, so the next slide. Yes, this was the first post. Now, I'll read out what I said, guys, to save you all the trouble of going over to it before, all right? But at the top, very simply, this was a pastor in Dublin who I thought took a very courageous stand, and he did a sermon, and in so many words, he said, watch out, Ireland, be careful. Let's pull it up a little bit bigger here. Ireland, be very careful. Now, he was speaking as an ordained pastor, right? as a man of God, all right, from his subjective position as a pastor, as a churchman, okay? And what he was saying, in so many words, was, watch out, Ireland, because traditionally and historically and biblically, the Israelites, who would be, of course, the ancestors of today's Jews and the Israeli state and all the rest of it, were always known as God's special chosen people. And before you start attacking them wholesale or supporting the people who are attacking them wholesale in various forms, please think about what you're doing, because there might be more to this than meets the eye. And I'm telling you now, guys, there is more to this than meets the eye, and most people are completely unaware of it. So let's read what I said and see how much of a radical statement with this. So I put in that quote, whose side is God on, does it matter? I put that in for this slide, you know. At the risk of possibly offending some, but equally convinced that Ireland is on a seriously dangerous anti-Semitic track, largely because of selective historical ignorance, socio-political misunderstandings, and or misplaced humanitarian sentiments, which are often subjective. Yeah, I found this sermon to be especially pertinent. Here, Pastor John warns Ireland of the dangers of anti-Jewish sentiment and how we may be fostering the same dark spirit that resulted in 6 million Jewish deaths at the hands of Hitler and co. For those who may be confused about the whole Arab-Israeli situation, or worse still, for those who may be cheering for Hamas, or for the closely related but often grossly misunderstood Palestinian cause, this biblical perspective may prove enlightening. Question mark. Okay, rhetorical question mark. No easy answers or solutions, but knowledge is the beginning of wisdom. Now, you'll see in a few moments some of the responses to that visceral, vicious and nasty comments directed at me for posting someone else's sermon. This is another man. I didn't do the sermon. I just heard it and I thought, do you know what? He's making a brave point. And I wanted to acknowledge his courage for standing up in his community and saying to them, look, some of you are not going to like what I'm going to say, but I think it's important. We have to consider it. I also think it was important and we have to consider it. Obviously, some people don't. And I'm arguing that the ones that don't have a truly objective point of view in this matter. Let's just see, guys. So the next slide are these. Oh, yes. Now, before I'm going to play, it's a 6-minute film, guys. I'll ask you please to stay with me on it, okay? I want to show you this first. It was constructed by the Security and the Center for Peace Communications. As they say, works through media, schools, and centers of spiritual and moral leadership in the Middle East and North Africa to roll back divisive ideologies and foster a mindset of inclusion and engagement. I want to say that first. Now, I didn't know this when I put the film up, the short film, all right? But we're going to play it now, guys, and I'm asking you, please, just sit through it. It's 6.5 minutes. I'm not going to interrupt it, but I'm just going to ask a couple of questions before you look at it, right? Does this sound like objective or subjective reporting to you? They seem to have a history of being absolutely, trying to bridge the differences between the Arabs and the Jews. They've got Arab members on the council and all this sort of stuff. Anyway, I came under attack for putting this up as well. And I just want those of you who may be more objectively minded to ask, to ask yourself, was it fair that I came under attack for this? Please listen.
The world awoke to the news of another massacre in Gaza, perpetrated by Israel.
31 Palestinians were killed as they were trying to get to a humanitarian aid site in southern Gaza. And according to eyewitnesses on the ground, doctors at local hospitals, as well as the Palestinian Ministry of Health, Israeli gunfire was responsible for these deaths.
Hamas-affiliated voices on social media immediately claimed that Israel had perpetrated a massacre, that this was some kind of trap to lure Palestinians to their death. And international media ran with that story more or less without any verification.
The problem is, the massacre the media describes never happened. The IDF issued the initial statement denying the report.
I urge you not to believe every rumor spread by Hamas.
They acknowledged firing warning shots to ward off potential thieves, but denied firing on Gazans at or near the distribution site. Then, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, Israel and US-backed organization managing aid distribution, released security footage from the aid site in question at the time of alleged massacre.
Which showed not only that the Israelis had not done this, but that there was no fire at at the site at all that could be determined.
At the same time, the IDF released drone footage from what they claim to be a different aid distribution site that showed masked gunmen shooting into the crowd of people as they tried to collect humanitarian aid. Gazans on the ground that we spoke to claimed the violence was provoked and perpetrated by Hamas.
نحن هنا بالقرب من المنطقة التي حدث فيها هذا الموضوع. كل الأدلة واللي شفناها بعيوننا بدل على أن حماس هي من تسبب حالة القتل والهلع أثناء توزيع المساعدات قبل أيام اللي صار. ولا أحد يملك سلاح وقدرة على التحرك والقيام بمثل هذا الهجوم على الناس إلا حماس، وما حدا له مصلحة بهذا الهجوم إلا حماس.
What we're really looking at is a full-fledged Hamas counteroffensive at an Israeli effort to undermine the last remaining pillar of Hamas rule in Gaza, the flow of aid into the Strip. Hamas has been able, even under very intense military pressure, to retain domination over the Strip because it controls sole access, really, to that central node of power. So,
actually, friends, what I'll do here, friends, I've stopped it early because we have, as usual, got to get through a lot today. The point I'm making, I've stopped it early, guys. You can go down on the Facebook page. It's a couple of posts down if you want to see that full one, guys. The point I'm trying to make is that this man and the organization he represents comes across as absolutely credible to me. Now, I'm not for a minute saying, just because we post proofs that one side has been lying to us does not for a second mean that the other side isn't lying as well. My point is we have to be objective. We can't just throw our hat into the ring and all line up behind, let's call it the Palestinian cause, without thinking it through, studying the nuances, understanding the history, and more importantly, I'm saying understanding all the way back to the biblical history, the foundations of this conflict, because without understanding that, and I believe most of the people involved in it don't understand this, there can't be a solution. And we will touch on that solution when we finish here today. Someone made a comment, children are starving no matter what the reasons are, and think that's bad. Yes, of course it is. It's awful. It's shocking. You'll never hear me say that innocent people being hurt in any conflict is a good thing. Of course it isn't. This is the tragedy, though. There's a trap here. There's a trap has been created, possibly by unseen dark forces, that we need to try and get to grips with. And it's not all, good guys and bad guys. And if I ever gave that impression, I'm sorry. But it could be a case of one side is benefiting from archetypal support, despite what they may or may not be doing wrong at the moment. And the other side is suffering from archetypal restrictions to do with their nature and their character going right back to their ancestors. And you'll see what we're talking about here in a moment. So as I said there before, you saw they seem to be people of credibility. That was the slide I just showed you. And I said, here's my heading. The truth is always the most important thing, correct? Please listen for 6.5 minutes and think independently for oneself as to how many lies, deceptions, and propaganda we are being exposed to. Maybe I should have added from both sides, but it seems that there's an overload on one side as far as Ireland's concerned. Okay, now this is just some of the commentary. We'll just look at it briefly. I've taken their names out because I don't want to embarrass them if they would be embarrassed. That's the Zionist sign over on the right. What you're doing, Mr. Integrity Ireland, is spreading the most evil and vile propaganda created by the demonic entity or genocidal cult known as Zionism. Is that objective, my friends? Is that someone's subjective opinion, or is that clear, nuanced, objective thinking that bears in mind that I did not author either of those two clips? I just share them. You preach light and love, but you peddle divisive hatred, really, and persecution of innocent women and children. Where? When have I ever done that? You have an irrational and I would say an inhumane spiritual discernment, really, thank you very much, and disposition when giving any credence to this garbage. All right, well, we've got your opinion, madam, sir. You think it's garbage. I'm saying to you, it's credible. You need to listen to it in context of the bigger picture, all right? Lower down, exposing Hamas propaganda. Laugh, laugh. I definitely won't be listening to this. Laugh out loud. The evidence is in the public domain. Yes, but who's putting the evidence in the public domain, my friend? Yeah. So what you and your Zion Nazi cohort, so now I'm a Nazi, a Zionist Nazi, yeah, is just bought and paid for words. I'm being paid for this, am I? Yes, well, I can assure you I am not. We see what's happening. Zionazis' words mean absolutely nothing when we see the truth. Move along. People like this, and I'm not dismissing you outright. What I'm saying is that I have been fortunate over the years. I've had very few attacks like this on subject material I put up. Most of it is supportive, thankful, appreciative, respectful, except for the obvious, the occasional trolls. You make enemies in this field too as well. But what I'm saying is, I personally don't appreciate this sort of commentary, obviously. It is hurtful to a certain extent. But when I sat back and looked at it, I thought, no, maybe I have to take responsibility for not explaining things fully or more fully. But it's a hugely complex situation out there, right? But secondly, I would say to people, if this is your intention to come on the page and attack me in manners like this, I would suggest that you cease doing so. Now, I'm not going to tell you to go away, because I think you will benefit by remaining and listening, because I assure you, and I hope I've proven this over the years, that I don't set out to deceive anyone. As a matter of fact, my whole adult life, or most of it anyway, since my late 30s, has been devoted to truth and justice matters, and I've suffered considerably for it, and without being paid for it, I might add, apart from the time when people contributed to my dear wife's funeral, but that's another story for another time. All right, let's press on, guys. But I'm saying to you, those of you who are disrupting the thread by coming in with calling me a Nazi and Zionist and all this sort of stuff, when there's no proof of that whatsoever, I put up a couple of posts to try and broaden people's perspective and open their minds and say, look, this is more nuanced. This is not, and why? Because I have a solution. When I say I have a solution, I can point to the source of this problem and therefore understanding what the possible solution might be. But you're not going to get to that point if you're embedded in the ranks of cheering for Hamas, or if you're so emotionally overwhelmed at the pictures of starving babies that you don't understand how and why this is happening. Of course, I have sympathy for them, but we've got to grow up, guys, and stop turning to the authorities to do all our thinking for us. Okay, and again, I apologize if this is. And then I'm not doing many of these, guys. There's only two. This is the other similar sort of thread. You're on a sticky wicket defending Israel. Who is defending Israel? I don't get it. Where was I defending Israel? Who are the masked ones firing this video? Now, this person suggests that the masked men we saw firing the video are being paid by Netanyahu and co., who he describes here as Miliowski. Now, that's his grandfather, Netanyahu, who was one of the original Zionists. We're not going to go into Zionism today. Again, it's complex. Israel's Jews, Zionists, Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims, blah, 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 blah. All cliques, all clans, and all ways of confusing us away from the original, with the top right there, the original principle and understanding what's really going on here, Then he makes reference to our own independence movements, our resistance. He's calling them, armed gangs called clans that Israeli is now employing to disrupt Hamas. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I don't know. I'm not there. It's very difficult to get into Gaza, by the way. I thought about doing it, but I researched that as well. It's almost impossible, right? Then he says the IDF are targeting kids on purpose. They're laughing and joking about taking pot shots at civilians at these aid centers. Look, I would be amazed, frankly. I'd be absolutely amazed. I was a soldier myself when I was young. Luckily, I was never involved in an armed conflict. But look, soldiers are by definition trained sociopaths, all right? You're told to follow orders. You've got no choice. Either follow orders or you get court-martialed, thrown out, or even shot at a time of action, right? That is the type of employment that a lot of foolish young men go into. They don't question authority. They do as they're told. But it would not surprise me at all that there are some incidences of atrocities being committed by IDF soldiers. Now, if that turns out to be a provable case, I would be profoundly disappointed and dismayed, because despite all the horrible things that are happening on the ground, the starving children, the displaced peoples, the politics, and then you have to go back into the 1800 years of exile of the Jews, the Holocaust in Germany, and all of these compounding factors, autocratic governments in Israel, right-wing leaning, you know, the hatred that's generated between these two groups of people, and so on and so forth. All of that aside, you have to understand that we're looking at a set of circumstances that can't be easily solved, and we have to work our way through it slowly. Yeah, and once again, sorry guys, just temporarily there lost the train of thought because of course this is live. But yeah, if I found out, the point I was making was, if I found out that IDF soldiers were committing atrocities with impunity, I would be shocked, more so than anything else, because at least they have some systems of accountability in the Israeli forces. I'm not saying they're the most robust they should be or whatever, but at least they have some systems of accountability. And I would imagine in a modern military force like this, with the world looking on, they're not going to be facilitating the sort of thing that's being suggested here by this person in this post, this attacking post on me. Excuse me. Sorry about that, guys. That shouldn't have happened. I had a thing on the screen. So he then says that the chief prosecutor in Israel recently stated that no reports of rape from women or women advocate groups regarding October the 7th had been received. That's simply not true, my friend. Now, there might be a report there, but we're going to look at that in a moment, okay? Zero evidence of beheaded babies. Again, why are we focusing in on this? Now, I'm going to concede here that I found reports that were later retracted, mistaken reports by first responders, right, that were the October 7th attacks by Hamas on Israel, right? And one or two people reported to the press that was on site straight away that they'd seen beheaded babies, and that they'd seen people who've been sexually assaulted and raped and all that sort of stuff. And of course, it went viral. And one soldier, I've got his name somewhere, but he actually said there was 40 babies beheaded. That's not true, apparently. Now, that's my position at the moment. That is not true. I've never said it was true, by the way. I just want to make that clear. But apparently, at least 29 infants were killed out of the 1,200 or so people that were murdered that day. All right? So let's not just be, nitpicking apples and oranges and all this sort of stuff. Let's just see the bigger picture. All right. Some awful stuff happened that day. Why it happened is still a question that probably needs to be resolved. So finally, our friend here, what does he say to me? He questions my own personal integrity. The fact that the media pushed out these false facts wasn't my fault, my friend. I didn't forward those false facts afterwards. All right. And then he uses the term Nazis again to justify slaughtering tens or hundreds of thousands of mainly women, children, and babies, as you're being told. Integrity is in your title. You might think about acting like an agent for genocide entity. I'm not working as an agent for any genocide agency. As a matter of fact, I hope to God that the information I'm sharing will help to stop it. Right, question mark on the right. Is this objectively true? This is from a Pakistani newspaper. Okay, now we're going to fly through a few of these a little bit quickly, guys. The point I'm making here is, look at the box bottom left. The Gaza government media office has claimed, all right, so can we take that on face value? Is it true? Is it exaggerated? Is it objective? Is it subjective? Is it biased, politically biased? We've got to ask these questions, all right? So it says there's 22,000 trucks that have been blocked by Israel. These trucks, many of which belong to the United Nations and international aid groups, are reportedly stuck at Gaza's entry ports, right? Officials describe this action as part of a wider plan to cause hunger, chaos, and a humanitarian crisis. I'm not saying that the idea of a humanitarian crisis may not be somewhere in the political agenda of so-called elites in the Israeli establishment. It might be part of their long-term plan. They may see an objective to this. And I'm not saying, of course, that that's right. I'm just saying is that this situation is almost impossible. And it was created largely by things like the British mandated Palestine, their deception of the Arabs after the Second World War. Or was it the First World War? First World War, sorry. Promising them, this, that, and the other, and then reneging on the promises, knowingly doing so with France. So these colonial empires created this mess in the first place. But like I said, there's more to be seen, But the Hamas officials haven't said Hamas, but have officially demanded the immediate and unconditional entry of all blockade aid trucks into Gaza before the situation worsens. Of course they would, as we saw in the film earlier. They want control of that pipeline of money and food because it's largely how they're able to keep control of the Gaza Strip. All right. I've seen videos with lots of Gazans complaining about them. They're not being broadcast, generally speaking. You have to go looking for them. I've seen witness statements given by perpetrators of the October 7th attack about what really happened, and some of it backs up some of the more exaggerated reports we heard from the Israeli military and administration at the time. Okay, but anyway, again, it's nuanced. We've got to understand. So Israel faces the blame for the hunger crisis in Gaza, but the UN's own data, now please look at this, guys, shows most of its aid is looted. All right, we're going to look at that in a second. The heading here's Al Jazeera, which is the Arabic newspaper. Israel says it's distributing aid in Gaza. So why are, and it says here, this is this month, this is just a couple of days ago. In both instances, Israel denied blocking the aid, blaming either UN inefficiency or Hamas for aid not reaching people in areas it has claimed to control for much of the war. So who's telling the truth? That's what the questions I'm asking is, who's telling the truth? Both claims can't be true. Israel says hundreds of truckloads of aid are waiting to enter Gaza. The implication there is that they're not stopping it. It's waiting to go in. Why isn't it being moved? All right. The United Nations and experts say that Palestinians in Gaza are at risk of famine. Right. So the UN is saying that Gazans are at risk in famine. Okay. And people are dying from famine. But there's all this aid sitting at the border. Hamas and the UN are blaming Israel for not letting it through. And let's see what the more objective truth might be. Israel says here, it imposes no limit on aid trucks entering Gaza. Who's lying to us, guys? All right? Yeah? Then to summarize this, because I've seen it already, basically they're saying that they have to assess the safety of the routes in for the trucks. And at the bottom here, look, right? He said the army offered to escort the aid groups, but they refused. That's AP News, by the way. So the IDF soldiers offered to escort the aid groups with the trucks into Gaza along routes that they knew were safer than others. All right. They won't allow the trucks to just go in on their own into routes where they know they're going to be looted or they're going to be apprehended by Hamas. That's common sense to me. It makes sense to me. Meanwhile, of course, kids are starving. That is not acceptable. There has to be a solution. But let's see who's really the problem here. Now, this again, I put up there, it's Yahoo News and Fox News. You can check this for yourself. I'm not saying they're the most reliable sources in the world, but let's again just read. It's only 2 slides, guys. I'm going to read this out. Information posted on the website of UNOPS, the UN Office for Project Services, shows that around 87%, or 1,753 of the 2013 aid trucks that entered Gaza since May the 19th, did not reach their final destinations, with the aid being stolen either, quote, peacefully by hungry people or forcefully by armed actors. Now, you tell me, guys, if you're IDF soldiers and you're in view of this, right, it says peacefully by hungry people. Obviously, they weren't being shot at if they were peacefully able to raid these trucks. Or if you have men like we saw in the film, armed men in there shooting into the crowd, and you're an IDF soldier, would you not think and believe it's your duty to take that guy out? Would you or would you not? I don't know. Rhetorical question, okay? Maybe that would account for some of the civilian, so-called civilian casualties who could very well be Hamas operators who do not wear a uniform, except we're on a killing spree like on October the 7th, and even then, some of them are wearing IDF uniforms. Were you aware of that, guys? Huh? Anyway, and again, I'm sorry if I'm but I'm sort of somewhat teed off at some of the comments that were directed at me, unjust and unfair comments, Anyway, the data, which showed that a record 90 trucks carrying some 1,700 tons of aid were looted on May the 31st alone, comes as shocking photos of emaciated Palestinian children, wait for it, some of which were later proven to be children with pre-existing health conditions used as propaganda by Hamas, have gone viral. Who controls the information coming out of Gaza, guys? Most of it. It's the Hamas authorities. Have they got an agenda? that would encourage them to exaggerate, to lie, or to deceive. This is the other one, same news outlets, guys, Fox News and Yahoo. The revelations about the UN's faulty aid system also come amid worldwide condemnation of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which we saw in that short film clip, guys, a new US and Israel-backed aid distribution mechanism devised in part to prevent aid from falling into Hamas's hands. Now, please look at this that I've underlined, guys. The United Nations has refused to cooperate with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. So who's stopping these trucks getting in? Who's stopping these trucks getting to the starving people, really? And who's planning Agenda 2030? Yeah, who's pushing mass migration of radical, and I say radical Muslim extremists into a lot of Western countries, etc., etc. There's a theme here, guys. We need to be aware of it. Again, it's not about picking a side and saying he's right, because there's a lot wrong on both sides, but we've got to be objective. The aid group announced on Sunday that it had delivered nearly 105 million meals to Gazans since it started operations in May, and that's without the cooperation of the United Nations, okay? Who a lot of the news outlets are going to for their information, are they not? Yeah. It also comes in sharp contrast to reports by some media outlets who chose to ignore evidence of Hamas stealing and reselling aid in order to fund its ongoing war, seemingly as a way to suggest that Israel is using starvation as a tactic of war or committing genocide. Israel has emphatically denied both claims. I'm not forming an opinion on this at the moment because it's a trap, guys. It's a trap for the innocent Gazans, the innocent ones. It's a trap for the IDF. It's a trap for the Hamas terrorists. It's a trap for the international community of do-gooders. And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, you know, well-intentioned do-gooders who just want to react from the heart and do something to help. And they believe that the best way to do that is to send donations to Palestine, to wave flags, which is indirectly supporting Hamas and the atrocities. Don't forget their constitution, if you like, the Hamas constitution, who was elected and supported by some 66% of the Palestinian population, you know, or at least they were at the time they were elected. You know, their mandate is to wipe Israel off the map. There's no two ways about it, you know. And we've got to ask the question then, well, if the Palestinians are entitled to their land, then are the Israelis entitled to theirs? Yes or no? And as we said in a previous presentation, simple fact, if you disarm Hamas, there could be peace. Yeah. If you disarm Israel, there's going to be a massacre of Jews. There can be no doubt about that. Yeah. And again, we've got to see the bigger picture, guys. So, were there rapes or no rapes? Very quickly, guys. This is one of the contentious issues. People are saying that they're sort of implying, that guy was implying that there wasn't any rapes. There were, guys. The difference is that there was a report done, all right? These are the debunked accounts at the top. I told you about that. There was people later rolled back and said, actually, I thought the girl had been assaulted because, and then he explains why. Then he finds out later that IDF soldiers had cleared the room and had moved the girl, and in the process, some of her clothes had come off or something like that. And as a consequence, he got the But here's what's different, guys. And again, I hope you're paying attention. The difference is they have some checks and balances. At least they're going in and checking these stories afterwards. And we're finding out that there weren't 40 beheaded babies. That was an exaggeration. But we're going to read something in a minute, guys, which just should put all this to bed, all right? But I'm conceding as well that if I gave the misleading impression that I believed everything that was being told by the Israeli press and military, then that I never said that. I never meant people to understand that. But we've got to understand again what's going on. Okay, so were there rapes or no rapes? So despite the rigorous standard, now this is the United Nations report, all right, had very rigorous standards that eliminated, in other words, most of the women that were raped were murdered afterwards. There was no way of collecting the evidence and things like that. So very rigorous standards, but still they arrived at clear conclusions. It stated that there were reasonable grounds to believe that multiple cases of sexual violence occurred in the course of the attack, including rape and gang rape in at least 3 different locations, blah, 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 blah. Okay? And that the site of the party, the big rave party, was the location of many cases. This is me being tongue-in-cheek. You know, were there rapes or no rapes, or was it just your ordinary run-of-the-mill, considerate and well-behaved terrorists out on a day outing, yeah, doing nothing really particularly bad? We've got to grow up, guys. All right. Next one. This is the Diner Project. I think it was sponsored by, is it a Jewish organization? But anyway, that's this is a report, very credible report, guys. 15 witnesses, 3 confessions, a pattern of naked dead bodies. I've heard that confession, guys, on film. It's a son himself, his brother, and his father admitted to committing rapes and murders. You know, they were in the the Hamas cohort. Okay, all the evidence from it, right? So they happened. Whether you start counting, well, it was only 1, or it was 21, or it was 40, or that. I mean, look, come on, guys. You know, let's just grasp the essential fact. You're dealing with people here that have got such a level of visceral hatred for their neighbors. You know, and maybe it goes both ways too, guys. And we've got to weigh up where it starts and stops. The difference, it seems, is one side respects, to a certain extent, a certain level of democratic constraints and processes, you know, where the other is, you know, it's basically uncontrollable. And again, there's a reason for it, okay? So this was the Yazidi women as well. I just make the comparison, ISIS, sexual slavery. It's all running in the same theme. They're all linked back to the Muslim Brotherhood and the same sort of philosophy. Are we going to run out of time again today? Now, I picked this guy. Again, I'm sorry about the graphic thing here, guys, but an attractive-looking girl. I'd never heard of her before, Shani Loke. Her mother admitted she'd been killed. That's her in the back of a Hamas truck on the right-hand side. I've got there, no rapes or murders, question mark. You know, on October the 9th, the 9th of October, Israeli declared war on Hamas and tightened its blockade of the Gaza Strip. Now, here's the Israeli defense minister saying, quote, "There will be no electricity, no food, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals and we are acting." So sorry, guys. One of those slides that I forgot to tighten up. I haven't got the rest. Anyway, obviously a very sobering declaration. And the question has to be asked, as a defense minister, has he the right and authority to make a statement like that? And then you say, well, there's the emotional, subjective justification for that. These shocking scenes. She was paraded through the streets afterwards. There she is again, bottom right. The point I'm making here is a culture of endemic, embedded historical violence. You see top left there, no one wants them. Why? This is why no one wants the Palestinians. Well, why don't they? And then on the right top there, Black September, Wikipedia. The history is convoluted and it's problematic, but there's a theme that runs through it, guys. This particular section of the Arab Muslim population have got such a proclivity for vicious violence and hatred of the Jews that it has to be taken into context of the supposed political situation. Okay, this boy on the bottom right in the red t-shirt is jumping up on the truck to spit on, you can see the broken body of this young girl. Yeah, and the point I'd like to make as well is how starving are these Hamas creatures, and even they're asking themselves, Palestinians must confront violence in our culture. This is what I'm saying is a big problem out here. Without that violence and without their unwillingness to cooperate with Israel in something approaching a brotherly fashion, there's never going to be a solution here, guys. Never. Other than something like what we're seeing here, the eventual, let's call it a genocide of the, of the innocent, or at least the civilian population, in order for the IDF to be able to get at Hamas, who have dug themselves under all of these civilian properties. How else are they going to root them out? It's tragic. It's shocking. It's awful. But we can't just pretend it's a simple case of good guys and bad guys. This point here, the real victims, I say, poor, starving, innocent Gazans. Well, this lady on the right, I've forgotten her name. But anyway, she was the leader of the Sinwar, the guy who was taken out by the IDF a few weeks back. Yeah. Does she look like she's starving? I know it's maybe an unfair comment, Does she look like she's starving? All the money up there, yes, it came from IDF photographs, but apparently they had millions in money stacked away in bank accounts. The leaders, a lot of the leadership that were assassinated by the Israelis. We have to understand what's going on. It doesn't mean what Israelis doing is right, but at least it puts it into a bit more objective context. The beheadings of infants are not. I'm going to read this to you guys. Sorry, again, a little bit overlapping on the frames. Is it inflammatory exaggeration, invention, lies, or nitpicking? Well, I'm saying now, having looked and researched this, because it wasn't an issue. I never mentioned this before, guys. I heard about it. I thought it was shocking. Yes, I believed it was true at the beginning. I never spoke to anyone about it, though. But in the comments, someone said, where are the 40 evidence, the 40 babies? So I went looking for it. And this is what I heard, right? So there's a media, American outlet that focuses on Middle East coverage, detailed a visit to Israel's National Center of Forensic Medicine to review evidence of the atrocities of October the 7th. Yeah, photographs revealed by the forensic team showed charred flesh of victims. So we now know victims were burned for one reason or another. Dr. Chen Kugel, check him out, the head of the center, said the victims ranged from 3 months to 80 or 90 years old. He said many bodies, including those of babies, were without heads. When asked if they were decapitated, he said yes. But under the circumstances, he said it was difficult to ascertain whether they were decapitated before or after death, as well as how they were beheaded, whether cut off by knife or blown off by a rocket-propelled grenade. Additionally, on October the 24th, a report by the Media Line detailed how journalists were invited by the Israeli military to screen videos, this is a continuation, consisting of home surveillance footage, Hamas GoPro body cams, dash cams, cell phone footage, and more. At the screening, Israeli military spokesman Daniel Hagari said, saying Hamas's ISIS is not some branding trick. Hamas is a sovereign entity that decided to commit this crime against humanity, to rape, to kill indiscriminately, to behead people, and yes, also babies. And they did this with complete understanding of what they were doing and what will happen afterward in Gaza as a consequence. What does that tell us, guys? You know? Oh, by the way, to be fair now, to be completely objective, you know, the report detailed horrific acts of violence displayed in the footage, but it did not say the videos confirmed babies were decapitated by Hamas militants. The footage did, however, show a fighter beheading an agricultural worker and the corpses of decapitated soldiers. Look, guys, we're picking straws here, you know, whatever. Obviously, something horrible happened. Some of the people that have attacked me tend to try and wash over what happened on October the 7th. But for me, the most disturbing and important part of this is probably that the fact that they did this with complete understanding of what they were doing and what will happen afterward in Gaza as a consequence. What? That the IDF would come in, all guns blazing, through the population, the Gazan population, and down into those tunnels one way or the other to root out the people who are responsible for this. Yeah. Now, why would Hamas want that to happen? Again, you've got to ask yourself the question. Could it be possible that they knew? Well, look, and maybe from their point of view, they thought, well, we're not going to beat the Israelis any other way unless we get international opinion fully and soundly on our side. We're going to have to take a risk with this one. We're going to go in and launch an attack and do some pretty bad stuff. But no doubt the Israelis are going to lose their head. And the next thing you know, we're going to be able to shout and cry that, look, they're killing, you know, hundreds of thousands of civilians, they're starving the babies, and all of a sudden we'll get our state. And what's the objective of having not just a Palestinian state, but, you know, a state that would be arguably controlled by an entity such as Hamas? It's to wipe Israel off the map. And to go back to the original question of the Pastor John, the very film, is that something that the international community should be contemplating, especially if God still sees them as his chosen people? Right. Why Arab countries ban all Gaza refugees? Please look up the history, guys. Who exactly is trapping the Gazans? I'm asking. Because, you know, is Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Syria, none of them will take Palestinian refugees. So they're trapped in the Gaza Strip in particular. You know, in the Gaza Strip, they're trapped there, controlled by Israel. because they got Hamas dug in the tunnels underneath them, Israel has a justification of sorts to keep going in there until they're satisfied. And hopefully the news today was that a lot of people in Israel are now up in arms saying that Hamas has been dealt with. If that's the case, then of course that removes one of the big arguments of the Israeli military to be in there any longer. But why? You've got to ask the question. Look at the history and you'll find out that almost every time that this particular group of Muslim Arabs, who we're calling the Palestinians, right, every time they went in numbers to another country, they caused problems sufficient in those countries, even starting a war in Jordan, for example, and sufficient for the leaders of those countries not really wanting to be too keen or too enthusiastic to have them back again. All right. So again, bigger picture thinking, my friends. Israel no longer has a right to exist. As I said, this is the theme. Iran says this all the time. Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthi rebels, most of the Palestinians and so on and so forth. That's the Hamas insignia there in the middle. So I just want to make the point that this issue is dividing the world at the moment. 28 UN member states, it could be more actually, do not recognize Israel, right? Nearly all of them are members of the Arab League, Muslim communist countries, right? As you can see, right? Okay. I'm arguing that could this trace back to the satanic Cain mindset, when Cain, the older brother, killed his younger brother and against the instructions from God, right? The Cain mindset, we know, for example, I've done this in previous presentations, guys, because I believe the symbolism and the historical scriptural history is hugely important. But what we know about Cain is that he was a murderer, right? Number one, he was a bloody murderer, and it was a big problem. And believe it or not, that's what set off human history as we know it. All of the big, strong, aggressive, violent males dominating world history, empires, kingdoms, banking industries, the military and complex. It's all of these, the satanic male mindset, which is all based on violence and suppression of the feminine. That's why you don't have females being recognized in most Arab countries at different levels, right? It's part of the psyche, all right? We also know that Cain started human civilization in the land of Nod, which is where? Iran today, okay? Guys, there's more going on than meets the eye. We have to understand this. And again, I'm going to urge you to keep looking, right? Now, in contrast, in this slide, these countries don't recognize Palestine as a state, all right? And again, this is, again, I don't know how accurate this is today. I just picked out the slide and stuck it up there. But meanwhile, Hamas refuses to disarm until Palestine state is recognized, I suppose, by everybody. I don't know who, how long are they going to hold on to their arms? This is intransigence, but they are recognized. As you see, the world is split over this issue, right? And I believe there's a reason for this split, and it has everything to do with the archetypes of good and evil. I'm not saying one side is good and one side is evil, but I'm saying that there is a tendency with autocratic structures such as militaries, governments, and everything to adopt almost invariably the satanic masculine mindset. And it is most exemplified at the moment in the visceral big brother hatred that the Arab nations have for Israel. Israel, though, in turn is in the younger, the feminine position, my daughter Zion and all the rest of it, the feminine position, the younger brother position. I know it doesn't, you think a brother has to be feminine. No, it's because you have to deal with the masculine first, okay? Afterwards, we move to the feminine. But when you deal with the masculine first, it's older brother, younger brother. The older brother must serve his younger brother. That's the construct of the original principle, top right, which I talk about in many of my presentations. This was the footage. The decision to show the footage was taken to counter the Holocaust denial-like phenomenon evolving in real time. Because right after the October 7th attacks, there was this huge visceral reaction, wasn't there? Collectively, all around the world, and apart from the now proven exaggerations of what happened, there was still a lot of people sort of trying to justify, oh, well, they sort of deserved it. There's something deep in the mind, in the collective mindset, guys, that needs to be addressed, because some of it doesn't make rational sense, at least not to me, okay? How are we doing? We might get through this for quick. This is what I said in response to some of the critiques on there. Please, my friends, this was on Facebook. Please, my friends, think objectively, not subjectively. In my pursuit of the truth over many, many years, I have had to change, amend, and review my own personal beliefs and understandings many times. This is a fundamental aspect of growing into wisdom versus merely repeating unproven, conditioned beliefs that have been sold to us by often untrustworthy third parties. Okay, mainstream media, governments with agendas, terrorism, terrorist organizations who want to wipe people off the map, and so on. I am neither condoning the IDF nor disputing the evils that a war like this brings. I am simply trying to establish truth by eliminating the lies. The world is currently embroiled in a great battle between good and evil. It is imperative that we each seek out the truth for ourselves. That requires that we listen objectively to competing narratives and weigh up what is and isn't definitively true. No war is without its own particular evils. Lies are always the first giveaway. I'd be very pleased, by the way, if some of those of you who attacked and criticized me read that post and perhaps give it a like if you think that it's a fair comment to respond to. Then somebody else sent me a video, and I said to them, I watched the video, thank you. This is precisely what I'm encouraging, that people inform themselves as fully as possible so as to be able to identify the lies from whichever side those lies are coming. It would be no great surprise to me that external dark forces were ultimately behind the October the 7th Hamas attack, and that most Israelis and Palestinians are likely unaware they are being manipulated by highly placed evil actors in each of their administrations. But I also believe there is a bigger picture perspective in the Arab-Israeli conflict, and without that perspective, it is all too easy for otherwise well-intentioned people to pick a side, not realizing they may be facilitating an enduring historical evil. The video that showed me was an IDF soldier who was wounded in the attacks, claiming that his superiors had told him and his colleagues to keep away from the border on the morning of the attack until 9 o'clock in the morning. Very suspicious, my friends. I hope somebody's looking into it. But, you know, like I said, you're dealing with some very dark entities here, guys, that are capable of some very, very dark things. Right. So we're now down to the last 2 minutes, guys. Can we do this very quickly? This is a short advertisement for video. You can find it on Rumble. It's also on Facebook and YouTube. But if you go to Rumble, it won't get taken down from there. Ishmael and Isaac, the sons of Abraham. Ishmael was known as a wild ass of a man. Okay. His hand was against every man and every man's hand was against him. Very much like the Abel character, the older brother. He was Isaac's older brother. All right. Isaac in turn had two sons, Esau and Jacob. Jacob became Israel. Ishmael here was the father of the Arab nations. Isaac was his son, Jacob, became the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. So you've got to look into it, guys. It's all about the original principle. I think we're going to get away with just getting maybe one more. Oh, yes, I'm not playing this video today. I just want to point out that TikTok, which is there on the left, I use StreamYard. It breaks up my videos into little sections, automatically. I don't edit them at all. I just fire them up onto TikTok. The one that had Trump explaining that if you indoctrinate children from a young age to be terrorists, that's a problem. Believe it or not, that's the only aspect of the video from last week that TikTok blocked. They didn't want it up there. That too, though, if you want to see it, go to the video from last week, the full video, it's there. Right, guys, almost finished. What have we got next? So here's the solution. I'll finish on the solution today. I did have a couple more, but I'll finish on the solution, guys. Very simply, this is at the end of that other video on Rumble, all right? The solution is, and it's all explained, concept, plan, and action, spirit, mind, body, God, Eve, Adam, and in the early stages, it was the deity, Abel and Cain, and so on and so forth. We need to realign ourselves as individuals and human society as a collective to the original, universal, archetypal, triadic principle. Please read the contents there, guys. I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave you now. I hope this has poured some oil on troubled waters. I'd encourage those of you that took umbrage at some of the things I put up, please stay on board so that you don't miss out on some of these novel, original, interesting truths. God bless everybody, and let's pray for peace in the Middle East.